so this is a short video on how to support students with limited vocabulary in English and who need assistance with pronunciation as well. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a list of vocabulary for the unit or the topic that you're working on. There are 3 different tiers of vocabulary that we talk about. Tier 1 is sort of the tip of the pyramid, and it's low frequency words that are very specific to your context. Then there's Tier 2 that are relatively high frequency but still important to your subject area. And then Tier 3 is sort of non-subject specific everyday language use. So you're trying to focus as much as possible on that second tier, just so that you can make the most benefit out of the teaching of the vocabulary that you're going to be doing. And you might obviously include some Tier 1 words as well, but your focus is primarily on Tier 2 vocabulary. Okay, so your only job is to provide this list to the student. The expectation is that they'll work out definitions and meanings for these words themselves. And then what you're going to be teaching them how to do is to recognize and reproduce the actual sounds of the word, so then they can actually comprehend them orally as well as when they see them in texts. And this will help them to sort of arrange their thoughts and also be able to communicate around these core ideas as well through oral speech. Alright, so the first step, once you've got your list of words, is to teach segmenting or get the student to do it themselves. Basically, this is breaking the word into syllables so that they can chunk the sound units, and then later on they'll blend them together to reproduce the sound correctly. So it's best practice to ask the student to do this themselves, just so that they can practice the skill, as it's basically what you do when you see an unfamiliar word. And there are many unfamiliar words in the English language. So if the student's having difficulty reproducing the word with just segmenting, then what you might like to do is what we call transliteration, which is basically turning the letters from the English language, which follows its own rules, to basically a phonetic version of it. So for example, the letter X, you might transliterate as EKS because the sound is X rather than some other thing. And again, this is only for words that the student is struggling to pronounce. You might use this step to assist, but the only essential part is the segmenting and then the blending. And if the student can do it perfectly already, then you won't need to focus on the word in any great detail. Okay, so for the blending stage, you've got the word, you've broken it down into its syllables, and you've practiced each of the sounds in isolation. And then what you have to do is, it's basically just repetition. You say the word naturally. So what you've done is you've accentuated and forced the student to see the individual sounds as they are. So you might say captive, it, e. So you've got the 4 sounds there. And then once those have been established, that they can be communicated clearly, then you blend them together into the actual word itself as we say it naturally in an Australian accent. So captivity. And then you practice that until you're happy that the student can reproduce the sound exactly. And then you move on to the next word on the list. And again, going through the segmenting and the blending and transliteration, only if you feel the student needs it. If they're already familiar with it and they can already pronounce it, that means there's no problem, and they'll be able to recognize it in speech as well as see it on the page and be able to reproduce it also. And then the last step, if you really want to show off with a bit of technology, it always helps to encourage repetition of this skill. So you might record an audio file on your phone. It should take 10 to 20 seconds really quickly. The correct pronunciation of the words on the list, and especially if you, the teacher, do it, then it's more likely that the student will be able to pick up your accentation and your emphasis when you're speaking these words in a classroom environment as well.